After an accident, a millionaire hires a nurse. He tries to resist. What happens next makes you speechless. Welcome, beautiful souls, old friends and new hearts alike. I'm so grateful you're here today. May peace surround you, love fill your heart, and may every moment you spend here bring you closer to joy. Whether this is your first time watching or you've been with us through many stories, you are deeply appreciated. I pray you are blessed with comfort, strength, and light today. May everything heavy be lifted, and may love meet you where you are. Before we dive into this deeply emotional love story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It means the world and helps keep these heartfelt stories alive. And I promise you, if you stay until the very end, you won't regret a second. This story will touch your soul. Now tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And what time is it where you are? I'd love to know how far this story is traveling. Ethan Sterling had everything the world worshipped: power, wealth, charm, and a gaze sharp enough to command silence in any room. The media called him a visionary. Wall Street called him ruthless. His penthouse was filled with priceless art, but not a single framed photo. His phone carried the numbers of dozens of women, but none who could say he ever truly saw them. To Ethan, love was a detour for the weak, marriage a business deal bound to fail, and intimacy a commodity bought and traded without consequence. On that cold, rain-drenched evening, the city lights blurred against his windshield as he sped through the winding road, still flushed from the touch of a woman he'd already forgotten. Her perfume lingered faintly on his collar, her laughter echoing in the chambers of his mind, not because it mattered, but because it was new. He didn't notice the sharp turn ahead. He didn't care about the storm's warning. His fingers tightened on the steering wheel as he replayed the curves of her smile, her skin, her surrender. Tires screeched. A jolt of panic sliced through his chest. He twisted the wheel too late. In an instant, his silver sports car veered off the road, the world spiraling into a blur of steel, speed, and screaming rubber. The tree came like a judgment, unmoving, merciless. The crash sounded like thunder cracking through flesh and bone. Glass exploded around him, piercing the leather interior, embedding in his skin like regret. Blood ran down his temple, warm and thick, tracing his jaw like a tear. The airbag suffocated him with a chemical hiss, but it couldn't stop the agony blooming across his ribs. He gasped, not for air, but for something he couldn't name, something real. "This can't be it," he whispered, voice trembling. The rain poured harder, mocking him. A street lamp flickered overhead, the only witness to his fall from invulnerability. He blinked through the blood and pain, glimpsing his cracked reflection in the rearview mirror, blue eyes clouded, mouth slack with disbelief. "Help!" he mumbled, though no one could hear him. Time stretched thin, like the final notes of a dying song. He remembered his mother's voice for the first time in years, not yelling or accusing, just humming a lullaby he never understood. Somewhere deep in his consciousness, memories he'd buried clawed their way up. Childhood loneliness, boardroom victories, women crying as he walked away without looking back. None of it mattered now. His phone was shattered, his body broken, his empire unreachable. All that remained was the sound of his own, shallow breathing, and the feeling of cold creeping into his bones. The headlights blinked once, then died. The world went quiet, except for the rain and the pulse in his ears. A voice inside whispered, "Is this how it ends?" His heart thudded. Desperate, stubborn, he tried to move his fingers. Nothing. The pain was a tidal wave. Darkness began to close in like velvet, curtains falling at the end of a grand performance. "I don't want to die," he thought. And for the first time, it wasn't about losing his wealth. It was about never having lived. In those final conscious seconds, Ethan Sterling, king of the untouchable, felt something wholly unfamiliar. Fear, not of death, but of a life squandered. As his eyes slipped shut, rain still hammering down on twisted metal, a tear, not of pain, but of surrender, slid down his cheek. The ambulance wouldn't arrive for another 17 minutes. But by then, Ethan would already be gone from the world he knew, drifting into a darkness deeper than sleep, carried not by sirens but by silence. The silence was not sudden. It had been there all along, waiting beneath the crash, behind the screams, in the breath he no longer had to give. Ethan Sterling floated somewhere, between pain and oblivion, for days that didn't exist, sustained by machines that hummed with clinical loyalty, untouched by the chaos of the world outside the ICU walls. Tubes fed him, monitors guarded him. Nurses came like shadows, quiet, efficient, temporary. None looked at him like a man, just a body, a case, a prognosis. He was unshaven, scarred, immobilized. A face once splashed across magazines was now a pale, swollen echo of itself. His jaw was fractured, his ribs cracked. His spine threatened rebellion with every involuntary twitch. But it wasn't the physical pain that dulled him. It was the stillness, the emptiness. He didn't know how many hours, days, weeks passed, only that the lights changed and voices murmured and nothing pierced the fog. Until one morning, without warning, his eyes opened. They didn't snap wide with cinematic drama. They fluttered, heavy, confused, dry. The ceiling above him was stark white, almost mocking. He blinked once, twice. The world rushed back like a flood through. A broken dam, beeping, the faint scent of antiseptic, the cold weight of wires clinging to his skin. A nurse noticed and shouted for a doctor. Ethan tried to speak, but his throat burned. Only a rasp escaped, one that sounded foreign even to him. "Water," he whispered, and a cup touched his lips, trembling in unfamiliar hands. The first sip of life tasted like sorrow. The doctor arrived, face unreadable, voice calm, explaining his injuries in clinical detachment, internal bleeding, 3 surgeries, a coma that lasted 2 weeks. "You're lucky," the doctor said, not realizing how cruel that word sounded to a man who didn't feel lucky at all. Ethan didn't respond. He stared past them all, not at the machines, but at the silence inside himself. The empire he had once ruled felt irrelevant now. Like a fantasy someone else had lived. His mind wandered to his penthouse. Did anyone notice he hadn't returned? Did anyone care beyond business obligations? He doubted it. Women he'd once charmed had likely moved on, already wrapped in someone else's arms. He felt no jealousy, just hollowness. His father's voice, cold, exacting, echoed in his skull. "Emotions are for the weak, son. Win or be forgotten." Ethan had lived by that creed. Now he was both defeated and forgotten. Over the following weeks, his body rebelled less. Physical therapy began. Progress was slow. He resented every step, every grimace of effort, every reminder that he was no longer invincible. One day, while attempting to grip a spoon, he dropped it and stared at the stainless steel against the floor like it was a mirror. "I can't even hold a damn spoon," he muttered. A young male nurse chuckled nervously, trying to lighten the mood. "It'll come back. You've been through hell, man." Ethan didn't laugh. His blue eyes, dull, rimmed with fatigue, met the nurse's with a glance that once intimidated boardrooms. Now it just looked tired. When discharged from the hospital, he was met not by a driver or friend, but by a private assistant he barely remembered hiring. The man offered polite smiles and brief updates about the world Ethan no longer cared for. Once home, he stepped into a mansion that felt too wide, too quiet, too lifeless. Dust had settled, where no maid had dared enter without instructions. He collapsed onto the edge of a velvet couch, every bone aching, and stared at the rows of liquor bottles on his bar, but didn't move. The doctor's voice returned to him. "You'll need home care." Someone experienced, Daily assistance, especially for your dressing and movement. Ethan had scoffed at first. I don't need a babysitter. But deep down, he knew he couldn't function alone. Pride, once his armor, now felt like a dead weight strapped to a broken body. Fine, he muttered to no one, picking up the phone. Find me someone who knows what the hell they're doing. He didn't ask for a name or a face. He didn't care. All he knew was that the silence in his home had begun to echo too loudly, and the ache in his soul was deeper than the one in his bones. The doorbell echoed through the cavernous halls of the Sterling estate, its sound a fragile intrusion into the suffocating silence that had settled like dust. Ethan lay propped against the high-backed chair in his study, muscles aching from hours of inactivity, when a soft knock announced the arrival of someone new, someone unknown. Amara Blake stepped inside with quiet confidence, her every movement measured, graceful, like a breeze slipping through cracked windows. Her eyes, warm and unyielding, met Ethan's cold blue ones without flinching. The contrast between them was stark. He, a man carved from ice and privilege. She, a woman forged from resilience and kindness. Ethan's lips curled into a smirk, the old armor clicking back into place. Another saint with a stethoscope? His voice was sharp, dripping with sarcasm. I don't need your pity. Amara's reply came softly but firmly, as if she knew this was the battle to be fought. Not with weapons, but with steady calm. Good, because I don't carry pity, only care. And you look like you've never had any. Her words landed like stones thrown into a still pond, rippling through his defenses. Ethan wanted to dismiss her, to order her away like the others. But there was something in her presence that unsettled him, something disarming. She didn't flinch at his barbs or arrogance. Instead, she set to work with gentle determination, her hands steady as she adjusted his pillows, her voice a soothing thread through the sterile air. Days bled into nights, and the mansion slowly shifted from a mausoleum of despair to a place where whispered conversations and soft laughter began to take root. Amara's routine was unchanging yet unpredictable, bringing small joys, a cup of herbal tea, a song hummed softly, a book read aloud during the long stretches of silence. Ethan's resistance was fierce at first. He pushed back with bitterness, testing her patience with every sarcastic remark and curt dismissal. But Amara met every storm with unwavering kindness, never allowing his walls to crumble, but rather inviting him to lower his guard on his own terms. One afternoon, as rain tapped rhythmically against the window panes, Ethan caught himself watching her, noting the way her eyes reflected genuine concern, how her smile never seemed forced. He found himself asking questions, not about business or money, but about her life, her dreams, the stories she carried behind her steady gaze. Amara revealed little, but enough to stir something long buried inside him, a flicker of connection, fragile but undeniable. "Why do you stay?" Ethan asked one evening, voice rough with vulnerability he barely recognized. She paused, hands folded in her lap, and met his gaze without hesitation. "Because beneath this armor," she said softly, "I see a man who's been waiting for someone to believe in him, even if he won't admit it." Her words struck deeper than any wound inflicted by the crash. For the first time, Ethan didn't deflect or retreat. Instead, he nodded, the motion slow and heavy, like a man emerging from a long, dark tunnel. Their conversations grew richer, their silences more comfortable. In the quiet moments, as Amara helped him move from the chair to the bed, Ethan felt a strange warmth in her touch, gentle, respectful, yet charged with something he dared not name. When she laughed softly at one of his rare jokes, he felt the stirrings of a heart he thought had stopped beating. Night after night she stayed late, reading or simply sitting nearby, her presence a balm to his fractured spirit. Slowly, imperceptibly, Ethan began to crave her company, not out of need, but out of something deeper. One evening, as they shared a rare meal together, Ethan caught her hand and held it a moment longer than necessary. "I'm not used to this," he admitted, voice barely above a whisper. being cared for, being seen. Amara squeezed his hand gently. "Then let me show you what it means to be truly seen," she replied. Their worlds, so different in origin, began to entwine, a dance of vulnerability and strength, mistrust and hope. Ethan's sarcasm softened, replaced by tentative honesty. Amara's steadfastness became a lighthouse in his storm. And as days stretched into weeks, a fragile trust blossomed, promising the possibility of something neither had dared to hope for: love. The day Amara prepared the bath for Ethan felt like crossing a threshold neither of them fully understood. The sterile mansion, usually echoing with cold silence, now held the soft sounds of running water and the gentle rustle of linens. Ethan sat rigid on the edge of the bathtub, muscles taut, not from pain but from a lifetime of barriers built high and thick. Amara moved with quiet confidence, her touch assured yet delicate, balancing professionalism with a kindness that unsettled him. "Just relax," she said softly, meeting his guarded gaze without judgment, as if inviting him into a sanctuary where strength was redefined by vulnerability. The warm water began to pour over his skin, tracing paths down his back, shoulders, and arms, each droplet breaking through years of armored detachment. But it was her hands that truly held power, their brush light, reverent, almost shy. Ethan's breath caught unexpectedly, a sensation unfamiliar and confusing. It wasn't lust or desire, not yet anyway. It was something deeper, a stirring awareness of being cared for, without strings attached. A quiet acknowledgement that he was more than the ruthless persona he projected. The tension in his jaw softened, and for a fleeting moment, he let go of the sharp edges of control that had defined him for so long. Amara's voice was a whisper, steady and calm. "I'm here to help you heal." "Ethan, no judgments, no expectations." She washed the grime and pain away, not just from his body, but from his soul. Her fingers lingered gently as she cleaned, tracing muscles that hadn't known tenderness in years. He felt exposed, naked in ways beyond the physical. But instead of recoiling, a flicker of trust ignited within him. As she poured water over his hair, the cool droplets cascading down his face mingled with the warmth of the bath, creating a sensation that was both refreshing and strange. "I never thought I'd need this," Ethan admitted, voice rough with emotion he barely recognized. "Being cared for, without having to be the strong one." Amara smiled softly, a light in her eyes that neither flattered nor pitied him. "Everyone needs care, Ethan. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who allow themselves to be vulnerable." The words sank in, stirring a delicate unease. After the bath, wrapped in a soft towel, Ethan sat quietly, the silence now heavy with new feelings. The vulnerability he'd resisted for so long pressed against him like a tide threatening to break his defenses. He found himself avoiding Amara's gaze, unsure how to face the openness in her eyes that reflected back the man he was only beginning to confront. Yet beneath the discomfort, there was a strange longing for connection, for acceptance, for something beyond the cold emptiness he had known. The room, once a place of sterile recovery, transformed into a fragile space where healing wasn't just physical but deeply emotional. For Ethan, the bath became more than a routine. It was a mirror showing him parts of himself long hidden and a step toward embracing. A life where softness wasn't weakness, but strength. As Amara helped him to bed that night, their hands brushed briefly, sending a current neither could deny. The ice around Ethan's heart had begun to crack, not with force, but with gentle persistence. And though he wasn't ready to admit it, he welcomed the thaw. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan found himself grappling with a sensation he hadn't expected: anticipation. It was subtle at first, a faint whisper in the silence of his mansion, but it grew louder each morning when Amara arrived. Her presence was no longer just a necessity for his physical healing. It became the rhythm his fractured world began to pulse to. He caught himself asking for her, not just to tend to his wounds, but to stay, to share the quiet moments between pain and recovery. Amara, with her gentle patience and unwavering strength, seemed to breathe life back into the cold, empty spaces of his home. She read to him from books she chose carefully, stories of courage, hope, and redemption, and her voice painted colors across the gray walls of his solitude. The aroma of her cooking filled the kitchen, surprising Ethan with tastes he had forgotten and flavors that stirred. Memories he thought were lost. She challenged him too, not with harsh words, but with quiet insistence, pushing him gently toward a better version of himself. One afternoon, as she handed him a plate of food, Ethan looked up, eyes searching hers, and asked, voice rough but earnest, "Why are you still here?" Amara's smile was soft, unwavering, as if the question had been asked 1,000 times, and the answer never changed. "Because," she said, "somewhere under that scowl and stubborn heart, I see a man worth healing." The words landed with the weight of a promise, and something inside Ethan shifted, a crack in his armor, where hope began to seep through. Slowly, inexorably, he began to fall, not with the reckless abandon of youthful passion, but with the deep, steady certainty of a man who had finally found something real. The mansion, once an empty shell echoing with loneliness and regret, blossomed into a home filled with warmth and light when Amara was near. Her laughter rang like music, breaking the oppressive silence, and her touch soothed the ache that no medicine could reach. Nights spent in quiet conversation replaced nights of restless pain, and Ethan's heart, long dormant, began to beat again with a rhythm that matched hers. There were moments of doubt, of vulnerability that threatened to unravel the fragile thread they wove between them. But Amara's presence was a constant anchor, steady and sure. She didn't rush him, didn't demand more than he could give, only asked that he be honest, that he let her in. And gradually he did. He shared his fears, his regrets, the loneliness that had shadowed his every success. She listened without judgment, offering understanding and kindness in return. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Ethan reached for her hand, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "You've changed everything," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Amara's eyes glistened in the firelight. "No," she replied gently, "you've changed yourself." The stubborn millionaire, once convinced that love was a waste of time, now found himself yearning for more than fleeting pleasure and empty conquests. He wanted forever with the woman who saw past his walls, who believed in the man beneath the scars. And in that desire, Ethan Sterling found not only healing, but the courage to hope again. Ethan's confession came quietly, almost hesitantly, as if the words themselves were fragile and dangerous to speak aloud. For a man who had once believed love was nothing more than a game, a fleeting distraction from the relentless pursuit of power and pleasure, admitting that his heart belonged to someone was a revolution. He barely understood himself. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of twilight filtering through tall windows, casting long shadows across the Sterling mansion that had witnessed so many facades, but few true moments of vulnerability. Amara sat across from him, her eyes searching his face, trying to decipher whether this declaration was just another phase, another illusion, or something real and lasting. Her hesitation was palpable, born not of doubt in his words, but from the scars left by his past. Scars she knew too well. Having seen the fortress he built around himself brick by brick. Ethan's voice trembled as he spoke. "Amara, I know I've hurt you with my silence, my walls, my stubbornness. But this, what I feel now, is not desire. It's devotion. It's wanting to be better because of you." His words hung in the air like a fragile promise, vulnerable yet sincere. Amara's heart battled between hope and caution. the desire to believe clashing with the fear of getting hurt once again. Days passed with unspoken tension between them, until one evening, Ethan planned something that surprised even himself, a dinner without the noise of his usual world, without the bright lights and endless parties that had defined his existence for so long. The grand dining room was transformed into an intimate sanctuary, with candles flickering softly, casting warm, dancing light across the table set for two. The scent of her favorite flowers mingled with the aroma of the meal he had prepared with careful attention, each detail chosen to show his care, his intent. When Amara entered the room, the look of surprise softened into something tender and cautious. But as she sat down and saw the genuine effort in his eyes, her defenses began to lower. Ethan reached across the table, his hand trembling slightly as it found hers, and with a voice full of raw emotion, he said, "I've had everything, wealth, power, fleeting pleasures, but not this, not someone who made me want to be better. You did. You made me see that love isn't weakness, it's strength." The moment stretched between them, weighty and profound, until Amara's smile broke through the last of her reservations. "I want to believe you, Ethan," she whispered, "because I see the man you're becoming, not just the man you were." The evening blossomed into a beautiful dance of connection, of two souls finding each other in the quiet spaces where masks fell away. Over time, Ethan's devotion grew deeper and steadier, not just in grand gestures, but in everyday moments. The way he listened, the way he remembered her small preferences, the way he stood by her side, even in silence. When he finally asked for her hand in marriage, it was not a demand but a humble plea, an invitation to continue the journey they had begun together. "Will you marry me, Amara? Not because I'm perfect, but because with you I want to be better every day." Tears glistened in her eyes as she nodded, the warmth of her love sealing a bond that neither wealth nor past mistakes could break. Their story, once marred by pain and guarded hearts, was now a testament to healing trust and the transformative power of love that finds even the most unwilling hearts and makes them whole. The months leading to the birth had been a time of transformation, not only for the life growing inside Amara, but for Ethan himself, who had slowly peeled away the layers of his hardened heart to reveal the vulnerability that love demands. Those 9 months had been filled with moments both fragile and powerful. Early morning ultrasounds, where they stared in awe at the flickering heartbeats of not one, but 3 tiny lives. Whispered dreams shared in the quiet hours when the world outside fell silent, leaving only the two of them and the hope they nurtured together, and the gentle hum of anticipation that wove itself into every corner of the Sterling estate. When the day finally arrived, it was not just the birth of 3 beautiful souls that marked their lives, but the triumph of love's undeniable power to heal, unite, and transform. Ethan paced nervously outside the delivery room, his usually composed demeanor fractured by the storm of emotions raging inside. The man who once held the world in his grasp now found himself trembling in the face of something far greater, a father's hope, fear and overwhelming love. Amara's strength, evident even through the exhaustion, grounded him. Her hand reached out through the thin curtain, her eyes locking with his, conveying a silent promise of new beginnings. Hours later, the cries of the triplets echoed through the hospital halls, 3 tiny, fierce declarations of life and hope. Ethan's first touch on the soft skin of each infant sent a shockwave through his soul, a connection so profound it defied words. His rugged hands cradled them with a tenderness born of awe and reverence. "They're perfect," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, tears threatening to fall. Amara smiled, exhaustion shadowing her face, but joy shining through. "They are. And they're ours." The journey home was filled with a new kind of silence, one heavy with responsibility, yet buoyed by the promise of love's endless possibilities. The mansion, once cold and empty, transformed overnight into a sanctuary where life blossomed in every room. The nursery, painted with soft pastels and filled with the gentle coos of newborns, became the heart of their home. Each day brought its challenges, sleepless nights, endless feedings, and the delicate dance of caring for three tiny lives at once. Yet through every trial, Ethan's resolve strengthened. He discovered a tenderness within himself he never knew existed, a patient love that refused to waver even in the face of exhaustion and uncertainty. Amara, radiant with motherhood's glow, was his constant partner, her calm presence a balm to his restless spirit. Together, they learned the language of their children's cries and smiles, celebrated the first tentative grasp of tiny hands, and marveled at every milestone with hearts bursting with pride. Friends and family who had once doubted the unlikely union now stood in awe of the family they had become, witnessing firsthand the transformative power of love and commitment. Late nights often found Ethan sitting quietly by the nursery window, holding one of the babies close, his blue eyes reflecting the soft moonlight as he whispered promises he intended to keep. "I never imagined this," he said softly, "but now I can't imagine life without you all." Amara joined him, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining in a silent vow of forever. "We're a family," she said simply, "stronger together." In those moments, Ethan's past, the pain, the mistakes, the loneliness, felt distant, replaced by the profound truth that love was not just a feeling, but a choice, a daily act of courage and faith. He became more than the ruthless businessman he once was. He was a father, a husband, a man reborn by the love of a woman, who had seen beyond his walls and refused to let him fall. The days blurred into weeks, and weeks into months, each filled with the messy, chaotic, beautiful reality of raising triplets. Laughter echoed through the halls as the babies grew, their personalities blossoming alongside the love that nurtured them. Amara and Ethan shared quiet smiles over coffee in the early mornings, stealing moments amidst the chaos to remind each other of the journey they had undertaken, one from brokenness to wholeness, from solitude to a family bound by love. One afternoon, as the triplets toddled around the garden, Ethan caught Amara's gaze and saw, reflected in her eyes, the life they had created together. "Thank you," he murmured, pulling her close, "for everything, for saving me." Amara smiled, resting her head against his chest. "We saved each other." Their love story, once shadowed by pain and doubt, had blossomed into a living testament to hope, redemption, and the incredible power of healing through connection. As the sun rose over the Sterling estate, bathing the world in golden light, three little hearts beat in rhythm with the man who once thought love was a lie, now a man who lived and breathed for it. The nurse who came to mend a broken body had become the love of his life, the mother of his children, and the keeper of his soul. And in their home, filled with laughter, tears, and endless love, Ethan Sterling found his true legacy, not in wealth or power, but in the family he cherished more than anything in the world.